Selma is still home, and some people seem to think I have a Southern accent. I don't know where that comes from. They usually, after they talk to me, first thing they say is, where are you from? And I usually try to say New Jersey just to get a reaction, but it usually does. And then I say, no, I live near Atlanta, but I'm from Selma. So I feel like I'm qualified to give a Selma welcome to all you people. And I hope you'll enjoy your time here in Selma. Those of you that are here for the first time, I know it's probably no telling what type of impression you had on Selma from just watching TV. I know just a couple of weeks ago when Clinton blew through town that my husband and I we were in Las Vegas at the time, and turned on CNN and hear all these images of Selma from, the worst days of Selma, and I'm just going, oh no, I have to go through this defense again. And he said, I met him, my husband, he's from Nebraska, and I met him in the 70s. And he said, after all the times I've been to Selma and all the people I've met, and as long as I've known you, I've never seen this Selma before. And I said, me either. And but you probably won't see it either unless you have a CNN camera on your shoulder, and that kind of brings out that part of it. But there's a nice part to Selma. The people here are the nicest anywhere, I think. And I think if you're here any length of time, you'll find that out. And certainly, as it was mentioned last night, Edgar Cayce did, and he did indeed tell a biographer that his statement was, my time in Selma was the happiest sustained period of my life. And that impressed me when I read that, because I'd like to think knowing members of my family had something to do with that. And to tell you a little bit about that era, when the Cayces moved here in 1912, and Edgar set up his business, the Cayce Art Company, right on Broad Street where the Selma Station area is now. And his living quarters were above the business. He never actually, I don't think, had a house here. I think they lived there the entire 12 or 13 years they were here. But as he said, his family wasn't with him right at first, so he became, one of the first things he did was to become involved with activities at First Christian Church. And that's where my family got to know him. They were also actually, I guess, founders of that church and dedicated members. And that's where they came to know each other through conferences, Sunday school, church, all the activities, which in that era of time was the main social focus of activities. And so someone asked me last night, well, did your family talk much about those times and about Edgar Cayce? And I said some, but as a child, I had remembered hearing, a few stories of how my grandfather knew this man that could go into these trances and predict things and find things. And I had also remembered hearing about how this man trusted my grandfather and his brother to conduct these trances, because he never knew what he said until they brought him out. And that was about the extent of it. In high school, I knew that there had been a marker put down in front of his store and his name, but that was the extent of my knowledge of Edgar Cayce. But that all changed in 1993, and at that time I was back in town, and I was helping my father move into an assisted living facility here. And we were going through some of his things and box of photographs when I came across a photograph that I recognized my grandfather as a young man, and there was another man in the picture with him. And I have this picture now. And I looked at it, and my grandfather's the one with the big smile and the hairstyle that would make Elvis envious. And I took this and looked at it and handed it to my father and said, do you know who this is? And with Pop in this picture. And he looked at it and said, oh yeah, that's Edgar Cayce. And that kind of jogged a few of those childhood memories loose. And I said, oh, well, didn't he find someone in our family that was missing for a while? And he said, oh yeah, that was his sister Mary. He said, she had gone on a trip and didn't return when she was supposed to, and her brothers got very worried about her. So they went to Mr. Cayce and put him in a trance. They conducted a lot of his trances here in Selma. And during that session, he identified where she was, what had happened to her, and when she would be home. And it all turned out fact, truth. And let me say right here, most of my anecdotes are going to be in the cemetery. I will do a few here, but most of them will be on that tour. But my father reminded me of that instance. And then he also said, there was another sister that he had a remarkable reading on, and that was Flora, and she was the one that Mr. Kirkpatrick referred to last night as having the mental collapse, and the doctors didn't know why, didn't know what was going on with her. And Mr. Cayce went into trance and said it's a abscessed tooth pressing on a nerve to the brain. It'll cure if you remove the tooth. And her aunt took her to Birmingham, had the tooth removed, and she recovered. He was just right on. And then my father went on to talk about how Mr. Cayce was such a great Sunday school teacher. He was just so well loved, especially by the youth of the church, and he was so well respected, not only just in the church, but in the town. But that's not to say everybody bought in to what his psychic abilities were. And I even had family members just a few years ago, one elderly member said, we just didn't understand that stuff, and it's like, well, too bad, but they still respected him enough as a person, as a man, to accept him here in Selma. And I think that's why he enjoyed the years here. But as far as some of the things, what happened with me, this was an interesting conversation we were having in 1993, but we were busy moving and packing, so I took that photograph and put it away with the others, went back to Atlanta, and basically just forgot about the conversation. But not for long, because unexpectedly my father died less than 2 months after this conversation, and now I know the reason for the conversation and the timing of the thing. But when I came across the photo again as I was settling his estate, I said that's when my interest in Edgar Cayce became an active one. And what I did, I made a copy of it, and I do family genealogy, so I thought, well, I'll send this to Virginia Beach and see if there's anything on my grandfather up there. So I did. Not really expecting much, because it'd been 75, 85 years ago. And but somewhere along the line, the picture luckily ended up on Jeanette Thomas's desk, and she called me and she said, she told me that who she was and what she did, and wanted to know if the names of other family members that were living in Selma during the time the Cayces were here. So I got my genealogy records out and gave her names and dates that I thought would fit. And she said, well, I'll get back with you if there's anything here. And again, I was hopeful, but not very expectant. But my interest had been piqued about Edgar Cayce. And so I thought, well, maybe I can go to the library. Maybe there's a book on him there. Or the bookstore. I'll go to Barnes & Noble's. Maybe there's something there on their lost and found shelves or something. So I go, and there's a whole section of books on Edgar Cayce. He's got his own name on this thing, and books after books. So I started buying books and reading about Edgar Cayce. And the more I read, just the more fascinated I became, not only just with reading about his, psychic abilities, but with the fact that my grandfather had known this man and had seen this thing up close and personal. It was firsthand accounts of this thing. I was just really fascinated and being hooked into it. And it was about this time Jeanette got back with me, and she said, well, we did find something on your family. And I thought, oh, good, there's a letter or two from my grandfather. And she said, yes, we have a file on your grandfather here. And she said, and there are 12 other relatives we have files on going all the way back to your great-grandparents. And I was just astounded. I could not believe it, because it played right into my interest of a love of history and research. And she said, we'll copy this material and send it to you. So I was excited as a child waiting for Christmas morning, waiting for this stuff to get to me. And it finally did. And how sometimes when you expect something, you finally get it, you're disappointed? That wasn't the case here. I was thrilled beyond belief. It was better than I ever could have hoped. And it was a whole box of material, a stack of papers this high. It took me months to go through this stuff, but the more I got into it, I mean, I probably had rug burns on my jaw from just dropping and hitting the floor every time I would read these things, because the first thing that I could connect that made a huge impression on me was I could connect truth to Edgar Cayce's abilities, because I knew these people. I mean, well, some of them, of course, were dead by the time I came along, but I knew of them. But for instance, when he diagnosed my great-grandfather's stomach cancer, I knew that's what the man had died of. And it was just, I was able to find example after example of things he said about people and their health, their personalities. I could connect fact with truth. And that, I'm pretty much a just down-to-earth, common sense, practical person. And that meant a lot to me, that he wasn't one of these flaky, psychic hotline, muddy the water types, So that kind of really hooked me in. So I started, in addition to reading the family things, to expanding beyond that. But the more I read, the more I wanted to. And that's where my interest led. It propelled me into doing a study on holistic health sciences, and that's what I got my doctorate in, and actually did my thesis on Edgar Cayce. But it was that interesting, and other things I could see in the family readings it was just so timely. I mean, here these readings were given 75 or 80 years ago, 60 years, whatever, and you could pick up a health and fitness magazine and see the same thing today. That's what they were talking about. Dr. Pagano mentioned the olive oil theory, and every modern thing that you see now. And just as an example of there was one relative, Jeanette made me promise to talk about her. And I have to say right off, she was related by marriage, not blood. I won't go any further than that. She was kind of a case, but she had 22 health readings. So there was a lot of material, and some of the things had to do with digestion and diet, and some of what he said to her as far as what she needed to do to correct her condition was don't cook with fats and grease. Well, now we've all heard that. We all know that now. But you have to remember the time that this was being given and the place. Now, this was in the South, where that cornerstone of philosophy is, if it ain't fried, it ain't fit to eat. We lived by that here for a long time, and a lot of people still do. So he said that, I think that was in 1931 he gave that reading. And he also went into the no red meats, just eat the fish, fowl, and lamb. And the same thing Dr. Pagano went over this morning. But one thing he told this lady that really amused me when I read, he recommended getting a massage. We all know the therapeutic benefits of that, but I could just picture her at her bridge club back in those days in Selma with a bunch of straight-laced Selma matrons saying, "Oh, Cayce said I can cure my indigestion by getting a massage." Even as recently as 10 years ago, if you dare told anybody that, you would get the raised eyebrows and the looks. It's like something seedy, what's going on here. But now, luckily, most of this is slowly making its way into mainstream Western thought and practice. I mean, it's not easy. It's kind of like turning a cruise ship. You're not going to just whip around and go in the right direction, but public interest is fueling this thought and these practices in that direction, and hopefully will make even bigger breakthroughs. But I did get pretty amused when I saw that he had recommended Aunt Lenora get a massage. I could just picture that, and that's not a pretty thought. But anyway, because and Jeanette again made me promise to tell that. And my memory of her is just this little old lady that, I was a child and used to, playing around on the floor at family outings, and Lenora, she always wore a hose rolled down in her garters, under her knees, and she had these tight little pin curls and big thick glasses and lips kind of poked. My cousin Judy and I just kind of made fun. I shouldn't tell that, but she just never really fit in. I don't know how she got hooked up. She was Alf's wife. Now, see, I shouldn't be telling this, as good looking as he is. But they didn't marry till they were about age 40. So I don't know how Lenora hooked Alf, but it happened. But anyways, as I was reading through the family readings, Edgar Cayce's ideals of truth and service just jumped out. I mean, they didn't have to jump out. It was just written, and these letters were written. They didn't know a descendant, decades later was going to be reading their personal correspondence. This was just, trusted friends expressing their inner thoughts to each other. And they just talked over and over about, he said, if this is not truth to this, I don't want it to succeed, and it won't succeed if it isn't. And just the deep ideals, ethical ideals he had was very appealing. And in addition to that, I was also impressed with just the scope of material and the depth that it went, just intricate detail into each system of the body, the physiology, and why he connected, why this worked and why it didn't work and what was happening with it. And it went from everything from, the serious diseases of the day and of this day to just personal health care, which shampoo to use, a formula for skin care, which appealed to me because it seems like every winter my skin gets drier and drier to the point where, I'm afraid my friends will come up and say, I love your new alligator shoes, and I'll have to say thanks, but I'm barefooted. It's just getting worse and worse as you get older. So I was thrilled to find out his, what he said about the castor oil and the lotions and things. But one particular relative had a very interesting discourse on mental illness. She had severe problems. And as I researched that, now I don't think it was Alzheimer's, it was other things, but just in a way to connect what he said decades ago with today, the Alzheimer's theory. Of course, he didn't call it that. It wasn't known that until fairly recently. But he talked of those that had mental brain deterioration. He said, those of you caring for those people, do not cook for them in aluminum cookware. Something very non-evasive, another thing that impressed me. And then he went on to say about how aluminum would accumulate in brain tissue, basically gum up the works. And I guess, it's, everybody wants to age well. And part of that is what we know about this horrible disease today. And if it's something as simple as changing your cookware, to help these people, it's well worth it. I know now I will not cook or buy new cookware that has aluminum. I won't even buy deodorant with aluminum because of the close locale to the lymph nodes from the underarms. And I want to keep whatever brain cells I have left functioning as highly as possible for as long as possible. I know every so often when I'll find myself just kind of standing glassy-eyed in front of the linen closet going, what did I come here for? I don't know if you can identify with that. You don't want too much of that. And Cayce gives just this wonderful window into how not to get to that point or stay in that point. I mean, the scope of his material and the depth of it was just amazing. And then again, the no fried foods, the no white bread, not too much pastries, drink 8 tumblers of water a day, and diet and exercise. And we all hear this today, but think of the times that he lived, and he was saying it's just too bad more people didn't pay attention and listen then. We'd probably be a lot better off now. But throughout, the letters, I just saw over and over things that he had predicted for my family that I knew to be true, and that proved to me that there's just a wealth of information. Because you think about this man that had this, 8th grade education in rural Kentucky in the 1800s and at the turn of the century. How did he know that? How? Where did it come from and how? And he just proved that there's a wealth of information from those deeper levels of consciousness that he could tap into. And he said it's there for all of us. Now, of course, he was a lot more advanced. It may take the rest of us, a lot longer to get there, but at least it's there. At least the potential is there, and that certainly was encouraging. And then, the fact that he talked about such techniques that when I was doing my studies in holistic health sciences that are on the cutting edge now, biofeedback, which is a form of visualization, which he talked about. He talked about energy medicine, vibrational medicine, light and sound, that just again, these non-invasive type cures and healthcare techniques. And it's just absolutely amazing, and which, he is rightly known as the father of holistic healthcare. So all of that just propelled me to do these studies on Cayce, and my interest hadn't waned a bit, even though I've gone through all the material and done my thesis, and it just fascinates me that he was so far ahead of his time, ahead of everybody else. And as Dr. Pagano said, the medical profession is, a lot of them, they're fighting it the whole way because they can't put it under a microscope and see it. They can hear anecdotal evidence forever and ever, but those types, the scientists and the medical people that are in control, if they don't see it under there, to them it doesn't exist, and that's the problem with some of Cayce. But I think the rest of us know that there is more, and they're finally having to pay attention to that. And it was kind of shown back in Mr. Kirkpatrick referred to last night, this case, that when Edgar's wife had tuberculosis and was just about on the point of dying, and he was actually in a period of disillusionment when he really just wanted to live a simple life and not have anything to do with the psychic mess that people had abused him with at that time. But, the doctor said, if she's going to die, that I've done all I can do. So he gave the reading and the outline, what needed to be done. They began implementing those, and sure enough, she began recovering and eventually was totally well. But during the time she was recovering, the doctor came to him and just kind of shook his head and said, that I'm amazed that she didn't die. I thought she had a week left. And he said, Cayce, I don't know what there is to this monkey business of yours, but keep it up. Maybe one day we'll catch up. And we can only hope. That's just all I can say. We can only hope. And throughout, and again, just my family readings, just it leaves no doubt that all this is real, and it's there. And it's there for everybody, and that's what so impressed me with ARE. It's not like if you want to, they're wonderful, the information on the spiritual mind-body connection. I don't think there's any finer accumulation of material anywhere in the world that you can have access to. Anybody can have access to. If you go to the Vatican and wanted to see Pope so-and-so's papers, do you think you could get very far? I don't think so. I mean, those are locked behind lock and key and vault after vault. You can walk off the street in Virginia Beach and see any of this material, and they're very objective. They don't try to push it on you. They don't try to make you accept it. You can accept it, you can criticize it, you can do whatever you want. It's just open, it's there. And I think that's just a wonderful thing about the organization and his work. But if anybody, wants to expand just their scope and their personal enlightenment, which is what has happened with me, I just say, go for it. Please, anything you can do to read more about what he says about, again, the connection of spirit, mind, and body is just there, and it's a wonderful thing. But it's getting a little past time, and I want to close by showing a few slides of Mr. Cayce and his family when he lived in Selma and when my family was here, and some of them together. And I'll just say, like I said, I'll tell more anecdotes on the cemetery tour, but if anybody has any other questions or anything you want to ask about Selma or the Cayces or anything, just feel free to catch me anytime during the weekend. So let me get this. Okay, this, of course, is Mr. Cayce in about 1912 when he first moved to Selma. This is the way he looked at that time. And this was on the front of his store. It was a very successful advertising technique where he would put pictures of local people up there, and everybody would enjoy going by and seeing who was in Cayce's window that week. But I find it rather funny. This thing says Men of Affairs in Selma. Might be a little dangerous to put up today, but it worked back then. And this shows how long ago it was. This is one of his price lists for different things that he did. This is one of his Sunday school groups, and maybe there are some people here that have done more research, but Edgar is the only one I know in this picture. Now this one I do know more. This, of course, is Mr. Cayce. This is Alf, the same one here. Let's see, this man married a Butler cousin. His name is Wood Gray, and he married Mamie Butler. In fact, Mr. Cayce played Cupid on getting those two together. This is my grandfather, Roger. And that's all I know is just this Sunday school group from the First Christian Church. This is another church group at Elkdale Park, and there are probably some people here that know a little bit more about Elkdale Park than I do. I understand it used to be a wonderful recreation place. It was long gone by the time I was here, but this was a picnic at Elkdale Park, and there's Mr. Cayce there. These two are cousins branch of Butlers. This is Mamie Butler Gray. Those were her sisters, and they were first cousins of my grandfather. Let's see, this is Alf Butler. Who else? This surprise fellow is my grandfather, Raj. This is his wife, Lois Allen Butler, my grandmother. And I don't know what to think of this one. Obviously, this was a church play, or maybe Easter when it was like the most ridiculous something funny was going on. But it showed Edgar's sense of humor. I think I just love this picture. And this is Mamie Butler Gray again. She was a character in this town. I mean, if anybody ever wanted to do a history of Selma between 1923 and 44. She talked the blue street, and she wrote just like she talked. And all those letters to Edgar for those years are in the files up there, and they're hysterical. She's just a hoot. She used to send him chickens on the train, live chickens. And this is another Edgar with the women of the Sunday school. There's Mamie Butler Gray again, and this is my grandmother. And I don't know, this is Alf, I think. I don't know who, this is Mr. Cayce. I don't know who the others are, but this is the streetcar probably on Broad Street or Water Avenue in Selma. And again, when you look at these, you realize the time element that Mr. Cayce made these amazing statements. I mean, look at the times that these were and how far ahead of the time he was. And this is another group, same thing, in front of the streetcar somewhere here.
What year is this?
This would probably be around, I'm going to say 1916 through 20, somewhere in that era. And this is this is Cayce's family and Alf out on a picnic. This is the old river bridge. Now the famous, of course, Edmund Pettus Bridge replaced this. And I think it was sometime in the 1940s. But this was the old bridge over the Alabama River. And this is the same group. Again, this is Alf, and these were church members. I've forgotten their names. And this is Hugh Lynn, Cayce's son. Is this Gertrude Jeanette or somebody? That may be his wife. And I think this. Okay, is this his sister? Is this Cayce's sister?
Where the red marker is.
Yeah. I don't know who that is. Do you know who this is?
No, I don't know who she is.
Okay,
That's
so
why
I
we
thought
borrowed
that-
a picture, hoping somebody would tell us.
And I love this picture of Alf. Now, if anything captures the times, this does. And where I don't know exactly where it was, but you can see, it looks like some type of covered bridge, and the era of rowboats and romance. I just love that picture of him. And that's him again. Who's this, Jeanette? Do you know who
I
this?
don't know who that is.
I don't know who either of these are. But again, somewhere along the river. Wasn't Lenora. She wasn't that nice looking.
That's for sure.
And this is Cayce's family. This is his mother. Are these his sisters, Jeanette?
Yes, one
Okay.
of those is.
I don't know who that is. But they were in Selma again. This is at that Elkdale Park that was here once upon a time. And that's his wife, Gertrude, in front of one of the cotton warehouses on Water Avenue. And this is Edgar Evans, Cayce's younger son, who was born here, and this person is Mamie Gray and Wood Gray's oldest daughter, Anne Elizabeth Gray, and she and Cayce had a very special relationship, which I'll go into more in the cemetery. And that's the same too, again along the Alabama River at the old bridge. And that's a picture Mr. Cayce took of Anne as a baby. And that's Anne and Cayce's younger son, Edgar Evans. And there they are again. I've told you, close family connections.
Was
So
she later Anne Gray Holbein?
Yeah,
yeah, that's who she is. That's who it is.
she became an optometrist in Mobile.
Yeah.
She started us in the study group.
Oh, really? Yeah, that was her. And that's it. So I know it's lunchtime now, so if anybody needs any directions on where to go for good food around, there's plenty of it. And I hope to see you all in the cemetery.
I just want to let you know that Anne is available here in Selma, and anytime that you would like to have a presentation on Cayce, for those of you who are from this area, just get in touch with her. She can talk about more than the Butlers, so I want you to know she's on tap.
I will try. Thanks.
And be back here at 2 o'clock for Dr. Rosalie Haynes.
See you at 2 o'clock vertical.